up guys, Alistair here, and today I'm going to talk to you about why Kong will most likely beat Godzilla in the upcoming clash of titans we know as Godzilla vs Kong. I'll be discussing it mainly from a story perspective as to why characters like Kong would traditionally win, but also we'll be going over subtle hints from the filmmakers themselves. But before we get into it, be sure to follow us on Twitter so you don't miss out on any updates on the channel, as well as Godzilla news as soon as we hear about it. Now, onto the video. Whether you're a Kong fan or a Godzilla fan, you each probably have your own reasons as to why you think your Titan will win. Arguments being that Kong has got a bigger brain and the mental ability to use tools as weapons, whilst Godzilla has the brawn and an immense weight to overpower Kong. But let's look at it from a different perspective, the story itself, not focusing on variables attributed to the monsters themselves. What kind of story is Godzilla vs Kong? Well, if we dissect how we expect it to go, then this character, who's smaller but full of courage, goes up against all odds to fight a larger, more arrogant foe that underestimates his enemy to the point it inevitably leads to his demise. Does it sound familiar? That premise comes from a little indie 1976 film called Rocky. It's a story about a big fight that's the highlight of the film, with the smaller of the two fighters, Rocky Balboa, being the one that goes through the biggest transformation against his arrogant champion foe, Apollo Creed. This is called an underdog story, and it's the primary reason as to why I believe Kong will win in 2020. And I am no Kong fanboy. I love Godzilla, and if it was up to me I'd have Godzilla win because he's my boy. But in this scenario, Kong is unfortunately the underdog, which means he has an arc that will transform him from being the little guy to the big guy, which usually makes for a more dynamic film. This can happen in a variety of different ways, which most likely involves him losing the first fight and then learning from that and coming back smarter and overcoming all odds. From a story perspective, the lesson that Kong has to learn will offer a greater dynamic for the film. He'll come through the film more fleshed out for potential future entries. To add fuel to this theory, we actually have a quote from the King of the Monsters director himself, Mike Dougherty, who actually has a hand in writing the screenplay for Godzilla vs Kong. He says, "We're looking at an almost David versus Goliath situation, because the moment you say Godzilla's gonna fight Kong, your first reaction is, Kong doesn't stand a chance. Godzilla's got his radioactive breath, etc, etc. But then you really take time to look at Kong as a character. It's like, okay, in Skull Island he was an adolescent, he was still growing, so who knows how big he is since the 1970s when they first met him." Dougherty even uses the Rocky reference. You know, it's like watching Rocky go up against Ivan Drago. It seems like it's unfair, but clearly this means the underdog might have a few surprises. Story-wise, the hope is that their motivations for fighting each other are sound and not contrived. But when you have two extremely hyper-aggressive, masculine territorial animals who both believe they're the rightful rulers of an entire species, chances are they're going to do more than have afternoon tea. This pretty much outright confirms the underdog theory, that he will go through the most challenges yet come out on top. And that David and Goliath comparison is a perfect example of a giant underestimating his enemy, though you'd think that the makers of Godzilla vs Kong understand how sensitive of a subject this is, and how a one-sided result could leave fans very divided. Adam Wingard, the director of GVK, has stated there will be a definitive winner, though this could mean a lot of things. Potentially, Godzilla could sacrifice himself against a bigger enemy like Destroyer, for example, as he accepts that Kong has proven himself to hold the mantle of King of the Monsters to keep the balance of nature, making Godzilla's death honorable instead of weak. This would leave Kong as the last Titan standing, making him a definitive winner without him necessarily killing one of our favorite giant lizards. Future entries are also another reason as to believe Kong will win, as Legendary's license with Godzilla ends in 2020 after Godzilla vs Kong's release, though they have expressed they'd love to continue making MonsterVerse films. However, with no talks of extending their license with Toho, it can be assumed that the MonsterVerse will continue without Godzilla, with Kong as the main Titan for the series, a character equally as famous as Godzilla. So that's why it makes sense that Kong will win in 2020. The co-writer states that Kong is the underdog, and if we learn anything from underdog movies, it's that the little guy always comes out on top. And with Adam Wingard confirming a definitive winner, all hints point towards the big hairy gorilla dude defeating the big scaly boy. But just like a boxing match, just because one may win doesn't mean you stop supporting your fighter. Even if Kong might win, I'm still rooting for the real King of the Monsters. But what do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. Do you still think Godzilla will win? If so, why? Make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss out on any Godzilla content and news when it releases. I've been Alistair from DangerVille, and we'll see you in the next one.